exercise 2.71 on page 73 in your workbook. So this exercise talks about the four different types of sentences, and we have simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. And why is this important? Because one of the ways that you can really easily look at a paragraph or a reading passage or a listening passage and then decide whether it's too difficult or too easy for your students is that you should be able to look for the clauses. The number of clauses in a sentence is very important to determining how difficult that sentence might be to a student. Lower students have a hard time processing sentences, not that are longer, but that have lots or have multiple clauses in them. That's what you want to look for. I'm only going to do the first half here. I'm going to do number one through number 10. Number 1 says, whenever Jane comes home, she turns on the news. And that's a complex sentence. Why? Because whenever Jane comes home is a dependent clause, and she turns on the news is an independent clause. So at least one, if you have one independent clause, that's a simple sentence. If you have an independent clause plus a dependent clause, that's going to be a complex sentence. Number 2, it may be fun to just sit on the beach, look at the sky, and do nothing. So believe it or not, this is a simple sentence. Why? What's the verb? May be. Who or what may be fun? It, whatever the it is. All right. And then what about all the rest of them? You have all these different verbs. It's to sit, to look, and to do. Those are 3 verbs inside of that infinitive. That's not the main verb of this sentence. This sentence only has one verb, which is may be, and one subject, which is it. And by definition, that's a simple sentence. Number 3, I don't like coffee, but I can't live without it. So the first verb is don't like, subject is I. Second verb is can't live, subject is I. You have 2 subject verbs. You have 2 independent clauses connected by the word but. Remember the fanboys? So but, and, or, nor, yet, so, for. So in this case, this is going to be a compound sentence, number 3. Number 4, do not drink and drive. That's going to be one subject verb already. So one subject plus 2 verbs, that's one clause. So do not drink and drive. You say, well, there's no subject. There's an understood you. Anytime you have a command in English, it's understood that the subject is you. So you have one subject, you, and the verb is do drink and do drive. You could have 10 verbs, but we have one subject with 5 or 6 verbs. That's still one subject-verb relationship. That makes for one clause. So that is going to be your main clause, or one main clause. But if you do drink, try to find a designated driver. So the but tells us there's a whole new independence clause, a whole new sentence coming. Sorry. Within that sentence, the sentence you have is, if you do drink, try to find a designated driver. Well, try to find, that's an independent clause because you try. It's a command again. And then if you do drink, if, that introduces an adverb clause, which is a dependent clause. So what you have right now is you have 2 independent clauses with one dependent clause. You have I, di, and that's going to be a compound complex sentence. Number 5, coffee has caffeine while most green teas do not. So coffee has caffeine, independent clause, and then while is like although most green teas do not, and that's going to be a dependent clause. So you have one independent clause and one dependent clause, and that's going to be a complex sentence. Number 6, when you are in New York, dependent clause, you should visit my aunt. You should visit my aunt. That's going to be an independent clause. And then there's another thing where the person says, and don't forget to watch a Broadway musical. That's another independent clause. So we have here 2 independent clauses with one dependent clause, and that's going to make it for a compound complex sentence. All right. Number 7, where the treasure lies is unknown. You do have 2 verbs here. You've got the sentence lies, the verb lies. So where the treasure lies. Treasure lies is one subject-verb relationship, and where the treasure lies, that's a clause, and that clause is a noun clause, and this noun clause is inside of it, which is a dependent clause, right? And this noun clause, this dependent clause, is inside of a big independent clause. So I'm going to say that number 7 is a complex sentence. Even though it's short and looks easy, when we say complex, it has nothing to do with it being complex or simple. We say simple. Even look at number 2 again, a sentence that is actually very long, 3 lines here, which is a very long sentence in this workbook. That is going to be a simple sentence because it only has one subject-verb relationship. All right, I'm at number 8 now. Salt is used all over the world, and it is no secret that in the old days it was valued very highly. Well, there are multiple clauses here. Salt is used all over the world, independent clause. It is no secret, blah, 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 an independent clause. What is no secret? That in the old days it was valued very highly. That's going to be a dependent clause. It's actually a noun clause because it tells what the secret was. So because you have two independent clauses and one dependent clause, you have a compound complex sentence. Number 9, we had a choice to go to the movies or we could stay home and watch a rental. So this one looks tricky, but it's not. It's actually just a compound sentence. We had a choice to go to the movies. Well, I have the word go. No, that's to go. That's an infinitive. So we had a choice. We had, subject verb, comma, or, that's the fanboys, the connector. So it's going to be an equal part coming, or we could stay. We could stay home and watch a rental. So that second part, which is one big independent clause, we could stay home and watch a rental. That's an independent clause. The subject is we could stay home and we could watch a rental. So you have in theory here two verbs but with one subject. So after the word or, you still only have one subject verb relationship, and that makes number 9 a compound sentence despite the fact that it's a relatively long sentence. Number 10, close that door please. That's you as the understood subject, close the door. That's going to be a simple sentence. I'm going to stop with this one. If you have any questions about numbers 11 through 20, please post them in the discussion group. We're happy to talk about them there. But that was an exercise that helps you practice these sentence types. And again, the purpose of learning these sentence types is not for you to demonstrate sentence types. And I would say it's not even to help you write better, although it might help some people write better. But what it does allow a teacher to do is to look at a paragraph and quickly size up. Oh, if you have a lot of dependent clauses popping in, it's going to be really hard for the student to comprehend some of that. In addition to it, you should never assume that because a student has read a bunch of compound sentences that they know how to make a compound sentence correctly. All right? Something you'll have to teach there. And that exercise, I hope that wasn't too difficult for you. If you have any questions, please post your questions in the discussion area for these exercises for this module.